Questions to the speakers will be at the final of the session. Even if you want to protest something, it will be the same. So the following speaker is Hrvoje Stančić. He will explain us the preservation of digitally signed and sealed records by the use of blockchain. Hrvoje Stančić is full professor at the Department of Information and Communication Science at the University of Zagreb, Croatia, and he is chair of archival and documentation science since 2008. He is author of more than 80 scientific and professional papers, and he is member of the board of Croatian Archival Society, and also director of the European research team at the InterPARES Trust project, so our director. So please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention. I'm very glad to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers for organizing such an important symposium today. My topic of today would be the preservation of digitally signed and sealed records by the use of blockchain. Luciana has mentioned the chain of preservation. Giovanni has shown some chains. And of course, I'll be mentioning some chains as well, as you can see. For me, it was a little bit difficult, so to say, to plan my presentation after knowing what Giovanni will throw in your lap in his presentation. So I have planned this presentation in sort of a minimalistic way. So first of all, I would like to say, just to state the fact that I'm sure that we all know, that the digital records today are being digitized as well as created or born digital. So after we digitize the records, they are in digital form, and we combine them with digitally born records, and we continue to preserve them in the same method. So we have to preserve the content. For the analog records, we digitize them in order to preserve the content and to be able for our users to use them in a more efficient way. And for digital records, we not only have to preserve the content, but the medium itself as well. So in terms of digital preservation, as I'm sure that you all know, we cannot actually perform or be inactive as sometimes we are with analog records. So if we put some analog record on a shelf, it will be most probably there in the next 50 to 70, maybe 100 years, maybe even more. For digital records, we have to act proactively. We have to do something in order for digital records not to become obsolete very fast. So we have to, for example, keep our digitized or digital records for 11 years, maybe 70 years, or maybe permanently. So how we do that in an environment that is constantly changing? So we are aiming for a moving target, so to say. Just to remind us all, the digitally preserved records, according to ISO 15489, they have to have the characteristics of authenticity, reliability, integrity, and usability. So this is something that we have to accomplish while doing the digital preservation. Whether it is in a single system or in a distributed set of system as it is what Giovanni has mentioned earlier. But also, we have to trust those digitally preserved records. So InterPARES project said that the trustworthy records are assessed as accurate, reliable, and authentic. So accuracy would actually mean the degree to which data, information, documents, or records are precise, correct, truthful, free of error or distortion, or pertinent to the matter. Reliability means that the record's ability to stand for the fact it is about. And authenticity is the trustworthiness of a record as a record. That is, the quality of a record that establishes that it is what it purports to be, and that it is free from any tampering or corruption. And of course, there are two preconditions for authenticity, and that is identity and integrity of the record. So we have to keep this in mind while trying to preserve not only digitized records, but digital records, and what I will be focusing on today, the digitally signed records. And this brings us to the issue of trust. As I mentioned earlier, we have to do it proactively. This means that over the years of long-term preservation, we will have to do some preservation actions, like conversion from one file format to another, like migration from medium to medium, like emulation or virtualization. So this is something that we will have to do, or some services will have to accomplish for us. And all this we have to do in the environment of a complex ecosystem of hardware, software, standards, and changing legal regulations sometimes as well. The digitally signed records is something that I will try to focus today. The digitally signed records are the records with addition of digital signature, and not only the digital signature, but the qualified digital signature. And that means that from the digital signature, we will have to be sure that the person saying that has signed this digital signature is really that person. So this means that we have to involve the third party, and that is the trust service providers or certification authorities, for them to provide the digital certificate of identity of a person who is signing a record. So we have to be sure of the identity of the signatory, and that is why we need digital certificates. So for example, in Croatia, for the last 4.5 years, our government has been issuing the identity cards with digital certificates in them. And that is why they have shortened the period of the validity of ID cards from 10 years to only 5 years. Because of the advancements in digital technology, because the advancements of cryptographic algorithms, because it would be unsafe to provide you with an ID card with a digital certificate for 10 years. Someone could do something to that over the 10 years. It is much safer to have it for 5 years. And this is the example of one of the documents that I have signed. I have just cut out on the left-hand side how the digital signature looks like. And you can see here that I have signed it on 1st October 2016. If you click on that, you will end up with this information showing that my digital certificate was valid from 1 day before the signing of this document, so September 30th, 2016, and that it will expire 2 years after that. So I'm waiting to see what will happen just in a few months, just to see how everything would evolve. So this is something that could very easily be found in a modern archives where the digitally signed records will be handed over to the archives for archives to preserve them and keep them and store them and archive them for many years. So how can we address this issue? What can we do with that? First of all, there are, let's say, 3 approaches, and the InterPARES project we added 4th approach. So first of all, you can try to preserve digital signatures. So basically you have e-signature and digital and a signer's document with signed attributes, and that is basically what's called a basic signature. Then you add timestamp to that so that you know when the signature was added to a certain document. Then you can wrap around in an onion-like principle a signature with long-term validation material, and that is the certificate and revocation data, so that you know whether the certificate was revoked or not revoked at the moment of signing. And then you can finally wrap another layer around that, and that is the signature providing long-term availability and integrity of validation materials or archival timestamp. This archival timestamp should last for a little bit longer, so 5 to 10 years. And then after that, or just before this final layer expires, you will have to add another and another and yet another and so on layer of wrapping around of archival timestamps. So basically this is what you will have to do within the digital archives. And if you have millions and millions of records, you will have to find out a precise moment when some record's digital signature is going to expire, and then act proactively before this happens, wrapping around it another layer of archival timestamps. Another approach is to eliminate digital signature, to just forget about that and preserve the record itself, and lose the information on the signing and the person who signed it and everything around that. The third approach is to record the trace of digital signatures in the metadata, and that is the trusted digital repositories approach. But then again, we have to know that some records are being archived for the long period of time, and some records will be used in the long-term records management systems. And in those systems, you will have to rely on the fact that you will have to be able to check whether the digital signature is still valid or not, or if it was valid at the time of writing. So that's why we added a 4th approach, and that is to record the certificate's validity information in the blockchain. And this is what the truster approach is, and that is what I'm going to explain a little bit more in details now. But before that, I would like us all to know and understand on a basic level what the blockchain is. So I will be explaining underlying principles of hash algorithm, of Merkle tree, chaining of top hashes, and of distributed consensus. Just to be sure that we all understand how blockchain functions, and then see how this solution could benefit the archival community. So first of all, the hash algorithm, one of the results of the hashing of a file is shown here. So it's a string of numbers and letters. So the hash function is actually a one-way function. And that means that you actually cannot know what the document is about by knowing this string of numbers. So this hash. So it's a one-way function. And you will end up with a same length string, whether you are hashing one-page document or a 2 hours movie. So it doesn't matter. You will end up with the same length of hash. So the other functionality is that every hash will be of the same size. And the third one is that it is theoretically, that means practically impossible or difficult or nearly impossible to create 2 different meaningful documents that would result with the same hash, with the same number. So this means that the hash number for each and every record being hashed is unique. So you can differentiate between the two, and then later on decide on the integrity of those records. The second concept is a Merkle tree. And this means that, for example, if you are creating 10 documents on the left-hand side on the bottom over 1 hour, so to say, just for the sake of example, then you can create hashes of those 10 documents. And then you can combine those 10 hashes into one. And that is this blue one. And then you can repeat the process for the next hour, and next hour, and next hour, and so on. And then you can combine all those hashes into one top hash of the day, so to say. So that you end up with just one hash proving the integrity of all hashed records below that. So I did that, and I created the hashes of 3 different files, just for example, of this presentation. And I went online, used MD5 hash generator. I pasted those 3 hashes there and calculated the root or top hash shown below here. So this is actually what has been shown on the previous slide. So it's rather easy to accomplish that. And here's the chain, I promised you. So then you can go on and repeat the process on the next day, ending up with the, let's say, Tuesday's top hash, but you will not stop there. You will actually use the previous day's hash and this day's top hash and combine them together, ending up with one more hash. And then you will repeat the same for the Wednesday, using the previous hash, top hash, and ending up with yet another top hash. So if you can prove this hash, then everything below that and everything before that didn't fail the integrity check. So no one has tampered with those records. So that is why chaining of top hashes is important for the blockchain. And then there is a concept of distributed or peer-to-peer consensus, which is the essence of blockchain and every cryptocurrency today. So basically, everyone has to agree that certain transaction, if we are speaking about cryptocurrencies, the certain transaction has happened, so that no one can spend the money twice. So everyone actually agrees that certain transaction happens, or everyone agrees that a certain document was hashed and that this is the hash of that document. When everyone agrees, or at least majority, that means 50% plus 1, then that becomes the truth, and this information then is written into the ledger, and the ledger is distributed among the peers. So everyone has the copy of the ledger of all transactions or all recorded records. And that brings us to the blockchain. So I will show you this slide and explain what you already have seen throughout this presentation. So we have been creating top hashes and the top hash from this block of documents, but also we can add here some other top hashes or some other transactions. And we will also use the hash of the previous block, and this becomes a block. And then we calculate a block hash from that and send it to the distributed ledger, and this information is recorded there. So the most important thing for you to understand is that no records ever leave the system. So only the hashes does. So only your records stay at your system. So you still have to have the digital archive hosting in your institution. And then it's repeated and so on. So in InterPARES Trust project, we have used this principle in order to create a so-called trust chain. It was done within the study model for preservation of trustworthiness of the digitally signed, timestamped, and/or sealed digital records, the so-called trusted preservation model. I have led this also with my colleagues from many different institutions. So Victoria Lemire from the University of British Columbia was involved, Natasha Krumchovsky from Electronic Office Systems from Moscow, blockchain innovation company called Enigio Time from Sweden, my graduate research assistants at my faculty, but also we did 3 case studies, and Tech Consulting Company and financial agency from Croatia were also involved. So we devised a model for blockchain-based validity information preservation called Trust Chain. And this is the high-level overview of the Trust Chain concept, which involves the International Alliance of Archival Institutions to be members of the blockchain called Trust Chain, which would actually confirm the hashes or of the records being or trying to be preserved, especially the validity information of the digitally signed records. So this is the diagram how it would function. So a producer would submit a digitally signed record for archiving. Digital archive would check the integrity of the submitted digital record, and the International Alliance of Archival Institutions would check the validity of digital signature. Of course, this check should be performed by consultation with the certification authority. If the digital signature is not valid, the process would stop. If it is valid and voted as valid by the majority of institutions, it would go back to the digital archive where the formation of the block would be performed. The block would be sealed, and it would be written in a distributed ledger, again shared by the International Alliance of Archival Institutions. And the digital record will be ingested into, and with the confirmed validity, into the digital archive. If you want to read this record after some time, so you would request a digital record, a user would request a digital record. The digital archive, from the digital archive, the user would check the validity of digital signature. Of course, it should be then performed with the certification authority. And if the digital signature is valid, then nothing happens, you can use the record. But if the digital signature is still not valid, at that precise moment, otherwise you would stop. But by using the blockchain solution, you could actually check whether this information about the validity was entered at the blockchain at the time of storing, archiving the record. If the information on the validity is there, then you could actually work with this record as if the digital signature is still valid. It's not, but you have the information that it was valid at the time. You can check the integrity, make sure that the integrity did not change, so you could actually function with that record and use it further on. So can you start, before we fully develop the trust chain, what can you do? You can use, for example, the Enigio Times blockchain aggregator, which would actually sit on top of your regular archive and just aggregate the hashes and register them in a Bitcoin blockchain as of now. So this is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to create a trust chain solution which will be hosted by the trusted institutions, so that is the International Alliance of Archival Institutions. To conclude, what can you do with trust chain? So with trust chain you can confirm the integrity of the archive records. You can confirm the existence or creation at a certain point of time because you are using the timestamps. You can confirm the sequence of records because they are entered in the blockchain, so you cannot change anything in that sense of sequence. You can support or enhance non-repudiation of digital signatures, and you can improve the validation. Of course, the archivists among us would notice that one thing is still missing, and that is the archival bond. And we are looking how to settle this, and we think that it might be settled by the use of linked data. And here are some resources. Of course, the presentation will be available, so you will be able to use them. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.